to the degree that you want something is the degree you're afraid of not having.
Yeah. God, I wish I started when I was younger. I go, well, yeah, but you didn't. So shut the fuck up and let's keep going.
Right.
Like, you can't.
Nobody changes until they change their energy. And when you change your energy, you change your life. Because it's not till then that it's really real.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is way worse than I thought. It's like, oh yeah, it's way, way worse than you thought.
Yeah.
But luckily, there's more to you than you think.
Matthew Hussey, my brother.
We're back.
We're back.
And we've gained a person.
We've added one.
Yeah.
We've plus one. And this is now a different conversation because my wife Vylana Marcus is right here.
I'm so happy. I have no idea what I'm in for today.
I know.
But
I didn't even give you a clue.
Nothing. But you were like, let's do one with you and Vi. And I was like, yes, that sounds great. And I'm drinking this some kind of special potion
right.
that I would only get around you, by the way.
It's part of my brand, that special potions of mushroom elixirs and
Tonics
cacaos.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
magical
comes with me.
spells.
I haven't inquired enough as to what's in it. So if I start talking gibberish in 10 minutes.
I'm just going to be buying time for about 30 minutes till it kicks in. Then we're getting real weird.
That's why we didn't tell you anything.
Yeah, shout out to Ben and Azria hosting us here at the Second Mountain. This place is incredible. All right, so here's what I want to talk about. Vi and I did a podcast that talked a lot about our union together, and it talked about a little bit how we came together specifically. But what I want to talk about is there's so many of us, and even, when we did the podcast before, a lot of it was talking about the actual process of finding your mate and finding your partner. And this is an area of expertise. And this is something where, even Vi and I have had some, if depending on how far back you go, had some definitely mixed success, some troubles, some trials, some tribulations, some challenges, some paths that we went down that we certainly should have gone down, some paths that were incredibly productive and beautiful to go down, ultimately didn't lead to fruition. Different categories, I would say, because there's, in some way you can be, grateful for everything, but in other ways you're like, wow, I definitely blew it on that one. You know what I mean? And so it's this kind of interesting learning process. And I think the goal of this podcast would be to expedite the learning process with all of our cumulative wisdom about how to sort through, both find, attract, a new mate, and then know when it's time to leave fast enough that you've gained the maximum amount of lesson, but bailed out of there before you're putting yourself through unnecessary suffering and waste of time.
This is so important and difficult. But some would say it's not actually difficult. I think that's the interesting, we'll talk about that, but some would say it's difficult until it's not. But my God, is this important, because you're dealing with time. There's that great in the movie Interstellar. Michael Caine plays the physicist.
Relativity, yeah.
Yeah, and he says something like, "I'm an old physicist. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of time." And when I think I've ever talking about dating or relationships, my relationship with that subject, I don't know if people quite realize how profound I feel it to be, because I'm not talking about dating tips. To me, I'm talking about the most precious resource we have, which is, where do you direct your energy with the time that you have? And that's what really messes people up. And, I deal with people dating in their 20s. I deal with people in their 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, everybody. The hardest part for people is often the regret of, why did I spend so much time with that person? Why was I with them for 10 years 10 of my best years I gave to someone that shouldn't have had them, or someone I knew was not right. My gut in year one told me this wasn't the right thing. Some people, their gut in week one tells them. And I heard somewhere that, relationships often end the same way they began. Someone in year 3, they say, I just can't deal with them going out and drinking every night and
Something
coming home late. And you're like,
beginning.
they were doing that on your first 5 dates. What did you This isn't a surprise. It's something you decided to pay attention to in year 3. So I think that I didn't know we were going to cover this today, but this is like a huge subject.
Yeah. It's the meat of it. I mean, what would you say from your lessons in that? Because there's that point of there's growth from the learning, and then there's that point of diminishing returns. And so,
Familiar with that.
So take us through like some of the ways that you got stuck and that you got trapped in situations where you extended your time beyond the point where there was growth and into that realm of diminishing returns.
Yeah, I think my tendency is to have a certain level of devotion. And I think we're always projecting onto our partners, always, whatever the ideal relationship that we can see. So I was so attached to the future outcome of some future state of what the relationship could be, instead of what was really in the present, like how it was like I was reaching so far into the future that I wasn't fully acknowledging what was present and how difficult it was. And I think I also just it was like habituated because I had never known stability in love before. It was always very chaotic and, a lot of really difficult emotions and experiences to move through, like betrayal and stuff like that. So I think that I had a desire for redemption because it would go so bad, like if I could fix this, and I love this person so much, so like it's worth it. And it just, I was notorious for having about like 2-year cycles where it would be the 2 years that I'm absolutely devoted, and then something just shifts in me where I'm really seeing more clearly where everything is out of alignment. And I think what could have helped me to, not go through those same patterns is if I just had more self-awareness and better boundaries and like enough honoring of myself to not stick in something that was so difficult no matter how much I loved. Like there's a lot I could have told myself from me sitting here now, then, but
I think you've exposed a trap. I think I can fix this. That's got to be a trap. And I think I can redeem the insults that I've received. That's another trap. So I think we've exposed like 2 traps here.
Yeah, there's the problem of misplaced energy, right? We have a certain amount of energy to give, especially in an area like our love lives where we want to give energy. It's not like going to the gym. Right? Some people naturally want to go to the gym because they're kind of driven that way, but a lot of people, it's a chore. Love tends not to be one of those things that's a chore for people. It's something that people they want it. They're hungry for it. They want to find a partnership with someone. They feel like, God, this vacation's great, but it'd be even better if I was sharing it with someone. It's a natural thing. And so
it's much more rare. They say this vacation's great, but I really wish I was working out. Some people are like that. I'm a freak like that.
Right,
and sometimes they'll do that.
But you've learned to love that part of life, right? And so the problem is we have this energy, and one of I think the most sort of, and we can debate how much people need to learn to manage on their own, be independent, love themselves, and so on. That's of course a huge part of it. But when people are single and they want to find companionship, that's one of the saddest things, is that they have all of this energy to give and they don't know where to give it. It's not the same as the energy you give to your brother, your mother, your family, your friends. It's a different kind of energy, and it's like having drunk too much coffee and you've got this energy, and where do you put it? And that's the feeling I think people have, and I've felt that. And so when we find someone, there's that energy already that's trying to find a home. And if we're not being scrutinizing about where the right home is for that, it just hones in on whatever is in front of us. And of course, we tend to care more about the things we invest in. So once we start now really investing in something, it becomes a little self-fulfilling in our mind. Both on the level of, I've worked really hard on this, so it's like sending a signal to our mind. So it must be important. this person must be special. Look at all the time I'm spending. And that in itself becomes kind of dangerous, because that then leads to a different kind of valuing of the investment, which is the sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
And we keep putting good energy after bad because, well, I've already been in it 5 years. I've been trying at this relationship 5 years, giving up now. What would that mean? What would I have to admit to make a left turn now?
So it's almost like it's exactly like you're trying to redeem the time you've already spent. That's your sunk cost.
That's
the
a huge
time
part
you've
of it.
invested. You're trying to redeem it by making it work. Well, if I just can turn this one domino over to the other side, flip this Othello coin back over to the light side, then at that point, the whole chain is worth it, and it's all validated.
And combine all of that with, all of us here at this table are driven, ambitious people who, we go after things in life. So when you're that kind of person as well, the idea that you can't fix it becomes an egoic kind of thing. Like, what do you mean? I can make this work,
Yeah.
So what? They're on the other side of the world. So what? They have a job that means they can never see me. So what? I just need to learn how to deal with that, because that's the next, that's my challenge right now. And we sometimes take on the wrong challenges.
Yeah,
Like, just because it's a challenge, it doesn't mean it's one worth doing.
for sure. And there's like a tremendous sacrifice of the self to just be so committed to something that doesn't work. It's like hugely if we're a little bit more clear about our values, for our own personal life as sovereign beings going into a relationship that way, I think that can kind of, help things from the start. Because otherwise there's such an immense sacrifice
There is.
in your sovereignty.
Yeah.
And
There
if-
is. And
and
people, and I've
agency.
watched, I've been in relationships before where I feel like I lost myself and thought that but it's almost, it doesn't become clear to you until afterwards the extent to which you lost yourself. And then you look back and you cringe and you're like, how did that happen? What was I doing? But when you're in it, it is a kind of drunken state, and you will convince yourself of crazy things. I should be doing this. Your family sees it. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? This is not okay. You don't get it. I'm not. And now you start to isolate from the people that.
You start to double down on your choice.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It starts with this slightly hubristic, egoic idea of like, I am the one that can fix this situation. I am the one that can alchemize it. I am the one that can make this work. And then the more it doesn't work, the more you start to doubt yourself. And you don't say, no, it's the situation that's unworkable. You're like, I'm a failure.
Something's
wrong with me because I know that this is possible, but it's just my fault.
Well, and I think that the backdrop on which all of this is set is a very confused set of ideas from, the romantic ideal of finding that person who's going to complete us, who's going to be like, we're going to meet them and everything that didn't make sense is going to make sense and all of that. And then, and half of people say that's going to happen. And then the other half say, the reason you're not finding anyone is because you believe all of that, and you need to get more real about what a relationship really is. It's a place where two people come and they work on it and they invest, and it's not easy, but you work on it and you make it something beautiful. You choose that person. I think then we struggle between these two things. I keep, for years I've wanted to make a video and I haven't made it because I struggle with it in some way. Like, I struggle with the kind of concept of it and what to say. But for years I've said, I'm going to make a video called, what do you do with the 70% perfect partner? And I think that's the part that so many people find themselves in, is with someone that's great.
And this is a conversation we've had, personally here.
Yep.
You and I have had this conversation because I believed that the only thing that existed in the world was the 70% partner, give or take 20%, whatever. But there was not that. There was 100 out of 100. Like, get the fuck out of here. I never liked math, but I believe in math, and I understand that the mathematic probability of that happening, it just doesn't make sense to me. I've never seen it before. I hadn't seen it externally. I hadn't found it myself. So I was like, you know what? Like, this is the world that we're in. So then it's a matter about choosing which percentage points, which categories you want to max out and which ones you're willing to take a sacrifice on. And I lived in that world. And then my solution to that problem was polyamory. Because then at that point, I could get people with a variety of different categories that could max out a certain category and really inspire me, but there could be deficiencies in other categories. But I thought by creating a Frankenstein's monster of 3 to 4 to I don't know how many it would have taken ultimately, because I was never quite fully satisfied. Yeah. That was a lot to do with my own need for validation and issues that were coming from my own self-love. But the idea was this Frankenstein's monster solution where I was like, okay, if I can get enough people, I will be fully complete and satisfied because I can source it from there. Of course, it was an incredibly torturous process going through that. My own human nature and jealousies and all of this.
I would be a wreck, by the way. You already, even with all of the things you describe as difficult about it, I'm like, it would ruin me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know how you did it.
It was a grand experiment, and it was fucking beautiful in a lot of ways. And it's not like that concept actually was the part that caused it not to work. There was something to be said for you could just experience all of the things that you're looking for in partnership just with many loves and many different people. Now, there was a lot of logistical challenges. There was jealousies amongst your partners.
And time.
There was an immense amount of time. There was an immense amount of conflict resolution. These were the costs that I was willing to pay. What I could never ultimately overcome was the deep human insecurity and jealousy of my sweetheart being with another man. And as much as I tried to work on it, and
so you never felt like because you obviously dealt with it.
I dealt with it.
But you didn't ever feel like you got to a place of, I'm at peace with this.
No, I mean, for brief moments, I could burst into a place of peace, but it would be temporary, like, someone who sucks a helium balloon and their voice gets high for a little while. Right. Like, yeah, your voice is high for a little while, but you can't suck helium forever. Like,
because you also don't strike me as a man that's built that way. Do you know what I mean? Right. Like the people, obviously, there are all sorts of different people in this world and they have different boundaries and so on, but you are sort of that typical, we share the same publisher in Karen Rinaldi, and she describes you as like the reason she fell in love with you is because it's just you had this man that walked in the door that immediately you're like, this is an alpha kind of, certain kind of caveman-esque guy, but then, who from her point of view, she's like, that had her almost immediately like, put you, like keep your arm's length, and then you start speaking. And there's this whole gentle, compassionate, spiritual, loving side of you that comes out. But that, when I see that, like that alpha side of you, I'm like, how did that side of you doesn't seem like it would even be built to deal with
and
that.
that was the challenge, right? Like I had to overcome that constantly. I had to overcome that part of me that wanted to just rip my shirt off and go into a frenzied rage like a grizzly bear or an elephant in must and just fucking freak the fuck out and start flipping over tables. Right. There was that part. I was like, settle down, wild mad elephant. Like it's okay. But that was always there. And I never really got to the end of that. And that was a problem. And I would even talk to, different mentors. I remember one of the mentors I talked to at a certain point, I was really struggling, because my partner, Whitney, she got with a really sexually aggressive lover and it was just tearing me apart. And he goes, this is great. This is your opportunity to be in submission to him. And I was like, oh
my God, even that word.
I was like, what? Fuck, you're right. But I don't like this at all. But it was like, yeah, like everything he's doing to her, he's doing to you. And the invitation is submission and surrender. And I was like,
I'd be like, I'm out.
That's the thing though, is there's like, you gained so much wisdom.
I did.
So much growth, so many things from those experiences. And I can absolutely say the same for myself. the place that I sit in now is how much can you grow and learn through love in a container that actually is truly serving of you thriving as your greatest self. Like that's kind of the contrast that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys this though. I forget the term, but there's that idea of the
Compersion?
the victor, the unreliability of the victor, right? There's a specific phrase that's used for it, but what it's getting at is, when Beyonce talks about like, just go after your dreams.
Right.
Beyonce would say that. It worked for Beyonce.
Right.
There's a lot of people who come to LA to follow their dreams, and the streets are paved with misery and tragic stories of people who it definitely didn't work out for.
Yeah.
And perhaps should have stayed in whatever, cozier job they were in. And so in a sense that one could make the argument of love that, you guys, from what I understand, there was a certainty this time around about like you meet this, this person, meet them again, and you go, oh my God, I am sure of this. And so that then it's almost like I imagine the feeling that comes with that is a realization that I want to scream to the world, everyone should look for this. Everyone should go for this degree of certainty, because this is the thing. I didn't know it was possible. You and I have talked about it prior to this year. Is this like, is there going to be a point where I sort of settle for something that's not like, it's amazing, but I don't have that certainty and I'm just going to live with that unrest internally? Then you find it and it's like, wait, everyone, this is the thing. Do you think that the certainty you have is available to everybody? And
I struggle with that. I struggle with that question. I don't know. And I'm not certain. I don't know if the universe is constructed with a grand intelligence in which everybody has somebody that, can actualize them on all of the different categories. Like I've said before with me and Vi, it's like I had a bingo card that had 100 spots on it, and the bingo wheel kept rolling of all our characteristics and trait. And I just hit bingo after bingo after bingo every time, didn't miss a number. Every time a new one came out, it was on my card. Whoa, what the fuck? How did that happen? Is that going to happen for everybody? I think it's more likely to happen when people have done an immense amount of self-work and have really gone through their own shadow and their own projections and their own need for validation. And I think Vi and I both had to do that. So that increases the likelihood. And then, but from there though, what is the likelihood? I'm not sure. However, to go back to what you're saying, the person who didn't go for their dream and stayed in Boise, Idaho, and just worked at the ski chalet and, did their thing, they would be tortured by the idea that they never went for it.
Yeah.
That they never actually went to LA, gave it a go, went to the auditions, and maybe it spiraled into, wow, I can't make money, and now I'm at the strip club, and now I'm like really sacrificing myself. And I'm sure there's some tragic stories that follow that line where people really get lost in, drugs and whatever things that are compromising their own morality and sense of self. But for the most part, if you go towards your dream, but are willing to say like, I gave it a go, and then here's the fallback, I think you're always going to feel better with the intention and the effort to go for your win and really go for like the A1 reality.
And I agree with that. And I'm interested in your opinion on this, Vi, because I deal with an extraordinary number of women who the calculation becomes different earlier than it typically does for men. Where if a woman is saying, I want a family and biologically I want that family to be my own, they are faced with these impossible choices of, I haven't found that person I'm certain of. But I also know that time is running out for me biologically to have my own children. Now, the idea of the metaphor of going to LA and going for my dream would be holding out for the right person.
Yeah.
But now there's a very real trade going on that's happening that panic, as we all know, has people often making bad decisions, ending up with people perhaps they shouldn't, you know, having children with someone that they are now attached to in some way that isn't right for that role.
Yeah.
Do you, as a woman, how do you feel about other women who are facing that kind of a dilemma?
That is one of the hardest questions to answer. I know for myself, that has been something on my radar. You know, I'm 33, you know, I still believe I have time. I believe in my body. I kind of also believe I believe that the universe is benevolent and whatever is meant to happen in my life will happen. However, you know, that's a massive life thing. Yeah. And you know, going into relationship, even when we started this relationship, like I know how important it is for me to be a mother. And that is an absolute, you know, that's a absolute need for me in partnership. So to imagine not having a partner and putting myself in the shoes of a woman who feels like they're getting older, who feels like I can incredibly empathize and just feel the stress, you know.
So what would you have done? What would you have done? And let's say we didn't get together, you know, a few years went by.
What would my plan of action be?
Yeah.
I probably would have tried to conceive myself.
Yeah.
You know, if all else failed and I had no other option, like, because I think, you know, raising children, like we are the stewards of their sovereignty. So when you are bringing them into a very chaotic dynamic or something that is, you know, broken or challenging, it's like that's the life that you are giving to someone else. So just my own core values, you know, I would want to have the authority in parenting myself if I didn't feel right with somebody.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the best answer, but
no,
that's
I think
it's a great answer, and it's an important. And how easy for me to say, but I actually wish more people would explore what their answer is to that question ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's part of, in what is an extraordinarily difficult thing, part of the antidote to the stress that follows, or the panic, or the guilt, or the regret, or whatever it may be. Because it's almost like that goal has to, on some level, if it's like, this is something that's part of my blueprint for my life that transcends the idea of finding a guy. It's just that important to me. I want to have this experience, or I want to do this. Then there are key questions like, okay, is the way I think I can achieve this feeling or this connection that I want, or whatever it may be, is the way I think I'm going to achieve that the only way? Or are there multiple ways?
Yeah.
Is it essential that it's biological? Can a child be adopted and I feel the same way? It's almost worth exploring those things.
Or even what your relationship to it is. The reason for having a child, is it selfishly, you know what I mean? Like really
100%.
getting deep into what that means. Like for me, I feel like everything that I've gone through in my own personal evolution are powerful tools to be able to pass on to somebody else that can help change this world. You know, it's less of a, obviously I want it for my own selfish reasons, but it's also, you know, for the greater good. It's not just because I want to have this thing that I think I own and I think I'm, you know, have the right to have. It's like
carry my name.
It's a different relationship to it.
I never understand that one. I always, the narcissistic urge to carry me on. That's always an odd one to me. But that's an interesting point I hadn't actually heard before, is the idea of, you know, with what I know, I can enable someone else to make an impact that's needed in the world. That's a very interesting point.
Because then the whole, I mean, it would be an absolutely beautiful thing to be able to give life through my body. But if my deeper value is what I just said, then, you know, adoption could absolutely, because it's the bringing up of their life.
And this is my point, is that I wish people would get this deep with it, because that in itself is a really important realization that in a way could liberate one from
all the stress
of
panic.
When am I going to meet someone? And then of course another question is, in my model of this, do I definitely need someone to do this with? Now, some people will say, yes, I'm not I don't want to do it unless it's in a traditional family unit. In which case, that's fine. But the traditional family unit actually supersedes your desire for a child in that situation, right? That's the more important part of the blueprint.
Yeah, that has primacy.
Yeah, and it's important to know that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just important to know that. I say this not as someone who claims to know the feelings. I say it as someone who deals with people day in, day out, where the elephant in the room is, because it's so easy for me to be like, hey, drop this guy. This is not the right situation for you. This person's not treating you well. Or why would you entertain a person like this? Or I need you to calm down on the first date because what you're communicating right now is frightening people. Like it's easy for me to say all of that, but the elephant in the room is that there is an internal calculation being made that isn't being spoken.
For sure.
Which is I'm freaking out. This has been something huge to me for a long time. And if it doesn't happen, the fear, and by the way, I see people on the other side of it too. When they're no longer in panic, they're just in pain because they go, it didn't happen. And especially if they feel like, going back to our original point, if I just stayed with someone for 7 years.
They're so regretful. Who
always told me, I'm not sure, maybe one day, kids, but I'm not, I don't know if I really want that. And they stayed because of the sunk cost fallacy, because they really like this person, because they put how much they like this person over the goal of having children, whatever it may be. Or just the fear that they'd never find somebody else, the scarcity that who am I going to find now to go through that whole, knowing each other, getting to a point where I'm comfortable having children with this person. When am I going to get to that point again? All of that makes someone stay in it. But then the regret that follows that person left me after all anyway. Or when it really came down to it and I said, hey, I don't have any more time for you to say you're not sure. And then they say, then I don't want them.
It seems like people need to get really clear. And like one of the things to understand is I think a lot of times people shy away from the hard conversations.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
They shy away from like really, this is what I want. Yep. I really want this. Do you want that? And just hold them accountable to that answer and sit there in that answer until like it's resolved. But a lot of times people shy away.
Well, because you feel like you're going, and I've done that very, very, very well in all of my relationships because I felt if I really spoke my true needs, then I would lose the relationship. Yep. Then I would lose the love. Yep. When that is actually a beautiful opportunity to see how out of alignment it is in the present, and it will continue to be, to just actually come forward with your needs and desires. And if they're not met in the other person, it's okay.
It's kind of like you have to get to a point where you're ready for the fallout of that.
Yeah.
You're mentally equipped for this conversation might mean today is the end of this relationship. Mm-hmm. And people are so not ready for that reality because it takes so much bravery to bring something up and so much acceptance of the paths that could follow.
For sure. The
fallout of that. And it's why it hurts people in every way, not just with the children argument. It hurts people. I mean, I have people all day long coming to me saying, I just don't know where I stand with him. And it always is, it's kind of comical that they think that I have more information about that than he does. Mm-hmm. I've never met this man. I haven't sat a day in their relationship before. And she's asking me where she stands, but she hasn't asked him. Mm-hmm. But why is she asking me before she's asking him? Because asking him has real consequences. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If I have that conversation, I might get an answer I don't want to hear. And a lot of people are very good at spending a long time in relationships. Again, I've been there before myself, where we don't ask the questions for which we're afraid of the answers. Mm-hmm.
And we don't ask those questions to ourselves. That was the thing that we do, but we lie to ourselves, right? Yeah. Like even if we ask it, because I asked myself, can you handle this, Aub? When I was in a polyamorous relationship, can you handle this? And I would lie like a politician to myself. Absolutely, you can. Like Don Miguel Ruiz could. And I'm talking about one of the great spiritual masters of our time, right? Saying like, and I don't even know if he could. It just was like, I went to his experience with him in Mexico and, he was talking about it and it seemed like he could.
Right.
So I was like, well, if this one human being that I've encountered could, then I can as well and I will. And it's like, but that wasn't true. That wasn't truly like answering honestly. It was answering in my most aspirational sense, which there is something noble about that, but it's also a denial. It's bypassing the real reality of our human needs and projecting some, blistering edge outlier hypothesis of what we're capable of, which of course we're capable of pretty much anything.
But I think it's really important that obviously you do talk about this in detail and very bravely and vulnerably, but I think it's so important that you do because it's, I remember when I first heard about you, whether it was from you or just reading about you and the polyamory, I remember thinking, God, I can't relate because I don't know how I would ever do it. And it's interesting when I hear you talk about it and you're like, there was, for you personally, there was like a standard I'd set for myself that was almost an impossible standard. That's so powerful to me because then I feel like, at least there's some part of that I can relate to. And I think the danger of the world we live in, I suppose it's a different point than the one we're making, but the danger of the world we live in is we are comparing ourselves to so many standards that aren't
Constantly.
real everywhere. And these kinds of conversations are so important because you're like, everyone, we're all seeing these people out there, these gurus or leaders or whatever, who, if you're modeling that, you're actually modeling something that probably doesn't even exist for them.
Right. Because we're just seeing what their public, seeing what's out there in the public eye and what they're showing. But unless the only people that know that truth, and I love Don Miguel Ruiz and everything he's taught, but the only people who know the truth of it are the people who've been having sex with him. If his penis is not inside you, you have no idea what the situation actually
I don't
is.
suppose I'll ever have any idea.
Exactly. You don't really know. Like, you don't really know if that's even a real thing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think like you said, all too often we're making these assumptions. And it is good to be aspirational. It is good to use them as like models to follow, but nonetheless, the expectations that come with that, like I should be able to do this, it really takes an honest and kind and forgiving and compassionate assessment of your real feelings and your real needs.
What do you think it takes for someone to be more honest with themselves so that they're not conning themselves? You talk about it with the polyamory, you talk about it in past relationships where you stayed in for a long time, conning yourself into thinking that you should have been doing more or that it was the right thing. Yeah. What do you think is the key to breaking the cycle of lying to yourself?
I mean, for me, sadly, it had to get bad enough that I would feel fed up. However, the tools that I use, like I think in relationship, like you said before, we can get really lost in it, in the we. That the sovereign you is kind of like a second thing that you take seriously, and really taking the time. Like I started a journaling practice a long time ago that helped me to be brutally honest with myself always. Like anything I was experiencing that was difficult, I would write about it. I would just be in stillness with myself, in nature, in meditation, whatever, and just ask myself those difficult questions because I'm the only one living in my body, in my life. So like, I better have an honest relationship with myself. Otherwise, you're always giving your power away to whatever the external circumstances are or what other people want from you.
Yeah. In those moments when you're journaling, when you're writing about your own thoughts and feelings, do you have a mechanism, and we've talked about this, for knowing what parts of you can trust? Because our gut, it's a very easy thing when we say trust your instincts or trust your gut or whatever, but it can be hard to discern. Well, firstly, I actually think instincts is a dangerous word. I prefer gut, if anything, because instincts is like in boxing,
Primal
your
and-
instinct when someone throws a punch at you, your instinct, if you ask people, what's the instinct when someone throws a punch? They say blocking. You're like, no, it's not. The instinct is blinking. And blinking's the worst possible instinct you can have when someone's throwing a punch. Let me go blind in the very moment where I need to be able to see what's happening.
So true.
So that's instinct. Instinct can get you killed.
Yeah.
Your gut, you one would hope there is some kind of deeper truth to what you're sensing. But how do you know what's truly your gut so you can trust it?
There's a really good prompt that actually came from a former partner of mine that I'm really grateful for. He told it to me when we were friends. He said, "What is the loving thing to do right now?" And asking that question, you can't be inauthentic about it. So that might be the most loving thing for me to do, is to leave the relationship.
And is that, do you qualify that as the most loving thing I can do for myself or for the other person?
I would typically direct it at myself.
Right.
Sometimes it would kind of depend on the situation, but
It has to include the self.
Yeah.
Because you can delude yourself. I think that's another common delusion is we think that we're loving somebody by staying with them, which is enabling them to be stuck in a situation that doesn't work. Well, I don't want to hurt them by leaving them. Oh, so you're going to draw it out and suck out more of their time where they're unfulfilled and they know that you're about to leave and they're stuck in this bardo where they know it's not right, and you're just you think you're doing them a favor? No, you're not. You're doing yourself a favor because you don't want to deal with the guilt of fucking leaving them. So have some courage and do what's right. Like that's loving from the divine perspective. But all the time we get confused too often with this coddling, devouring mother kind of love of like, well, I'm loving them by staying with them and I don't know what would happen to them if I left. Good. Maybe they need to hit fucking rock bottom. Maybe instead of prostrating your body so every time they're doing jumping jacks, they're not landing with their precious little footsies on the hard gravel, but they're landing on your flesh instead. That's not helping them.
Yeah.
You know, it's not helping them at all.
True.
That's a lot of what I had to work through in myself. I've always had difficulty ending relationships because I can feel other people's experience so much. So withdrawing my love in that way feels horrifying. And what I would have to move through in myself is the tremendous guilt and shame that I would feel. But the recognition that's really important is that has everything to do with you and you. It's not really about you and the other person. Like my own guilt, my own shame, that's a me and me relationship. So like he just said, you are making it easier on yourself by staying because you would feel tremendous guilt or shame or pain around their, trying to coddle their pain. But it's like, it's just subjecting yourself to more of all the same chaos.
And it's justified logically by the pain that they will feel in the moment. But it's kind of a nearsighted empathy, right? You're not taking a longer approach to empathy where you're saying what's best for this person over the long term. It's just how hurt are they going to be today? And how horrible is that going to make me feel?
Yeah.
I don't want them to experience this hurt. And I also don't want to experience the hurt of hurting someone that badly. And so everything becomes kind of nearsighted in that way. I'm always encouraged by how much people do actually move on. You know what I mean? Like I'm always, that's the shocking thing to me is how you can really think you're going to die. And then you don't. And then it becomes a memory and it becomes something you can talk about with some sense of indifference or casually as we do right here. You can sort of analyze it from a distance. And that I think that's so easy to say when you're removed from it. When you're in it, it feels like it's never going to end. And I think it's worth mentioning for anyone who's watching this, who's they're in the suck of deep, deep pain right now of something having just ended. You do move on from that.
Yeah.
You can't sustain that pain forever.
And there's a cycle of rebirth into becoming a new version of yourself. And something I would love to offer for the same people or anyone listening that a healer helped me work through tremendously coming out of my last relationship is the most loving thing to do for everyone is being in truth and being honest with yourself. Like you might think it might be the most painful thing that you're subjecting them to by telling them the truth that, the relationship really doesn't align for me, and I'm going to move on. And it is painful, but it's the most loving thing you can do because it's truth. Otherwise, you're sitting in misery and dishonesty with people.
A lover's decency is the absence of strategy. That's a modification of something Chogyam Trungpa said, but I think it's true. Like, if you have strategy, that's manipulation. That's black magic. Like, your decency is the absence of strategy, and the only thing that's the absence of strategy is truth. And I think that's like a really important guidepost, but it is scary. It is scary to tell the truth without strategy, without putting a little English on the cue ball when you spin it to them. And
particularly if you're habituated to not do that, it's really hard to tell the truth.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, there's all sorts of philosophical arguments on how much truth is. Like, I know people, the Sam Harris argument is against lying altogether. It's, very much telling the truth at all times, no matter what, that kind of radical honesty. Forgive me, Sam Harris, if I've misquoted you there. But he wrote a book called Lying, I think, which was on that argument, which I find to be extraordinarily difficult to practice.
Lying?
not lying.
Not lying.
Not lying.
The blistering, platonic, 100%
truth
black
at
and
all
white.
times. Someone buys you a gift and you say, I don't like this jacket. There are times where it seems unnecessary to be overly truthful. But
What were you thinking?
I'm not going to wear this ever. I do think, though, we've stumbled on something that can answer, at least in part, the original conundrum, which is what do you do when you're unsure, or how sure do you need to be, and so on. And I do think part of the clarifying question is not remaining in something where you can't give someone the gift of your full trying. Where you can't really go all in and give everything you can, which isn't quite, I don't think, the same thing as thinking this person is everything you ever wanted. I think it's just you have to be able to make a decision to say, I'm going to give my all.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel you can get to that place, which is, I don't think, a place that's easy to think your way into. I don't think it's easy to go around in circles going, but what's great about this person? Why should I give my all? It's a hard place to logic yourself into. I think sometimes you have a realization. Sadly, sometimes you give someone up and then realize, I want to give my all, right? So that happens too. But I think it's a very difficult thing to logic yourself into.
Some of that is just psychology, though.
Right. I just lost it. Now I need it back.
Now I never knew how much I loved it.
There's an immature, childish version of that for sure. But I do think we owe the person that we're with the full expression of what we can be.
Yeah.
And who we can be and what we can give. And if we can't give that, then we are doing that person a disservice, because we're keeping them around when someone else
For sure.
will be willing to give 100% while we're giving our 70.
And also, I that really, really, truly lands for me. That was really beautiful. And also, if you're not there, just being authentic about it.
Yeah. Well, that's the crazy thing is someone doesn't know that we're giving 70% necessarily. They may know something, like they feel insecure and not know why. And that's really sad as well, is when in a relationship, someone is feeling anxious. People have the attachment style theory in their mind, right? Which I find interesting as a heuristic, but I also, it kind of, we move between attachment styles depending on what's going on. And someone could find themselves, I'm an anxious attachment style. I'm anxious all the time. They don't realize that they're in a situation where they're like, the house 2 doors down from me just got robbed, right? Literally 2 nights ago. They broke in, the couple were away on holiday, and they watched on camera as 2 people broke into their house and raided the place.
Damn.
I got told this the same night. It was the first night. That was at like 8:30. That night, I set the alarm in my house. I never set the alarm in my house. I went to bed and I'm like, well, there's 3 police cars and a bird above our house. I'm going to set the alarm tonight. That's not, I'm an anxious person.
Yeah.
That's something triggered a different kind of anxiety here. And in a relationship, it's much more subtle than the house 2 doors down just got burgled. It's, you have this sense that something's off, or this sense that you don't feel fully loved, this sense that you don't feel safe. And that, I think, is what is really insidious about it, is that we often lie and tell someone we're trying, they're like, why didn't you call today? Or why didn't you, what do you, I was so busy. I was this, I was that. You come up with all these reasons why, but deep down, if you really explored it, you'd know, if I was really trying, I would have called today.
Mm.
Why didn't I call today? But you don't tell them that.
Yeah.
There's also there's a part of it that sometimes we do just feel so busy and so overwhelmed. And when that relationship isn't a priority, we don't even want to tell the truth because the truth would require a lot of energy and a lot of conversation.
Oh, yeah.
So we just keep putting it off, maybe even not for any other than a petty, selfish reason. Like, fuck, I just got so much to do. I can't deal with this right now. So I'll just lie in the meantime, put this off down to a later date. But you can continually convince yourself that there's never the right time to engage with that kind of energetic cost of a conversation.
It's I can't afford for this to break today.
Yeah.
But again, it's almost a misunderstanding of energy that we all do,
Right.
which is I'm overvaluing how disruptive this may be to break today, and I'm undervaluing how much energy is being lost every day in me just fighting myself. Not sure. Should I do this? Should I do that? Am I happy? Am I not happy? Is this person what I want? Aren't they what? And then you burn. You're just like, sometimes there are days where I get really aligned, where I feel, and I still feel like I'm finding that point in my life. I don't feel like I'm learning that. And there are times in my life, even recently, where I realize how much of my life I've spent sort of being at odds with myself, fighting myself. And there's a sort of melancholy I have on the days where I'm really aligned, because I get to the end of the day and I'm like, fuck, that's what I'm capable of.
Yeah, then you punish yourself for all the time before.
That's what I can do when I'm like,
You did that last night.
I did that last night.
really?
Yeah, I do that all the time. And that's the scary part about recognizing what is possible, because we have to forgive ourselves for everything that we didn't live up to that standard, and all the time that was spent. That's the most tragic thing that any of us can look at is, wow, I could have been this happy the whole time. All I had to do was believe in it and do these simple practices, which I knew. Sometimes you just didn't know any better. You were just totally asleep. And really, you can't beat yourself up about that.
Yeah.
That's kind of foolish to do. We'll still do it, but it's really looking back, knowing that you knew better and still didn't, and then having to forgive yourself. But that is the practice of forgiveness. There is no past. And if you're doing that, you're just drawing all of the emotions and all of the energy from the past into your present, which is extending it into the future and actually amplifying the same situation. Whereas if you truly forgive yourself, ho'oponopono, back to the zero state of absolute forgiveness, then the past is the past and it's done. And your present is always generous and available for you to chart a new way.
Do you have a technique or something practical you do to achieve that kind of forgiveness? Because I think a lot of people want to forgive themselves. They want to be able to move on, and they really, get lodged in that place of, it becomes like I forgive myself, but then they haven't, and it repeats on them. What's the most effective way you've found?
I write to myself. I write to myself as if I was talking to a friend in a really loving way. I write the things that I want to let go of. And a lot of times, I'll burn the things that I want to let go of. And then I write out who I want to become, who I want to live, how I want to be. So it's kind of just like psychological feedback from what I'm feeling in my body, what's happening in my mind, writing it down on paper. It's almost like studying yourself.
You have to, I think it first becomes with the intellectual understanding that there is absolutely no productivity that comes from that aspect of self-punishment. There's the necessity to learn, and then there's anything else beyond your learning is absolutely counterproductive. So you understand that intellectually, then you have okay, I understand this. There's no reason for this, but you still may be punishing yourself. You still may have not forgiven yourself because you may have a misguided idea that that's what's going to help you learn. And if you punish yourself enough, you'll actually learn the lesson the next time. But that's not the case, actually, because then you'll just have more shame and you'll have less recognition of the things that you're doing in the same time because you're going to be afraid of the punishment that you're going to dole out to yourself. So you'll blind yourself to actually what you're doing. Like forgiveness allows you to have awareness. And so, but as she said, I think one of the best forgiveness is a practice. You're never going to get it all. You know, it's not like you just go in one swoop and you get it all. It'd be like trying to clean a spilled jar of mayonnaise that's shattered on the ground with one paper towel. Like, you're not going to get it all. There's going to be glass and goo, and you're going to have to come back with, you know, different soaps and rags and wipes until you really get it all. And you may not be able to do that in a day or a time, but you go into that process of forgiveness. I forgive myself for this. I forgive myself for this. I forgive myself for this. And then
go deep with it.
Yeah, and
like
really feel
deep
it.
with
Really
it.
feel it. And then I think the process it's actually a ceremony called the despacho, where you actually then let that go. You either send it down a river, tie it to a rock, send it to the ocean, or burn it, you know, and actually let that go. So you don't have a whole stack of papers about your forgiveness, which can then remind you of your failures to forgive yourself. And then you'd have something else to forgive yourself for.
But that's I think important for everyone to hear, is that it's a practice. And that's the same, you know, letting people go is a practice. The idea of having difficult conversations is a practice. I honestly think we think of too many things as a like, too many things, parts of life we expect are supposed to be this epiphany moment, instead of likening them to a muscle.
It's like working out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's there's people in my organization over the years that I kept around way longer than I should have, because I was just, you know, it's kind of the same as the breakup thing. Oh, but they do this and they do that, and they were nice today, or there was this thing today, or whatever. Like, you have these moments where it's, you debate yourself instead of taking action. And I think the more you learn to, like, all right, I felt this, I know this feeling inside me, I know it's legitimate, I've felt it for a while, let me act on it. This relationship, I know I've been asking the same question over and over again for a year. Like, if the moment you act on it, I do think there is tremendous, frightening as hell, the letting go of something, and then you've jumped off the cliff and you're like, fuck, then you have all those feelings. Did I do the right thing? Is this, you know, it's all of that. But I do think there is tremendous power in a kind of euphoria. Every time you do it, you make a decision, it gets stronger and stronger.
And you make it your practice.
Yeah.
So here's the dilemma that I think is really hard to navigate. So, and again, this is very personal for every situation, but I think it's important that we see the potential of somebody, you know, because if we don't see that potential, we're not going to give them the space and the ability. So if someone is an alcoholic, if we don't see them in the potential as that sober person, we're actually denying them the opportunity to do that. Because if we continue to look at them like an alcoholic for their whole, and we never adopt that, then they're going to look at themselves. It's the looking glass self. I think the sociologist Cooley came up with that. Like, we're looking for cues from other people. So whether it's an employee or whether you're someone in an intimate relationship, it's important to see them as their potential self. And that can actually help bring forward that potential. However, therein lies the dilemma, because we want to see them in their potential. But if we keep waiting for that and it keeps failing, at what point do we say, look, I can see it, but it's not happening. And it's time, this hasn't happened fast enough, which then again feels like a judgment, you know. So it is this bit of a conundrum.
I have two answers to that. One is that whatever the gap is, which we all have, the gap between where we are and what we could be, that gap can't be the part that's going to meet your needs once it's there. It has to be like the part that's just you seeing them for what they can be. I see some beauty in you, some possibility in you of what you can be, and I'm excited to tease that out of you. I'm excited to be a champion of that, to stand by you as you work towards that. But the part they need to get can't be the part that meets your basic needs in a relationship.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is extremely dangerous when people take on that. I call it the one-day wager. You know, the wager you make that one day this person is going to be what I need, not what I would like them to be, what I need them to be for me to feel happy and have my needs met in this relationship. It's the most dangerous wager anyone can make. There's that Jacob M. Broad quote, consider how hard it is to change yourself and you'll understand what little chance you have of changing anybody else. Is to use the gym idea, it's really, really hard to go to the gym when we want a nice body. And everyone wants a nice body. Everyone would like to have a great body. But it's really hard still, even wanting it, it's hard to get to the gym. Now, deal with someone who doesn't even necessarily want the change you want for them. And you get in a real, now it's like the idea that you're going to change that person becomes so remote. So I think that's the first point. Now, that doesn't mean a compassionate approach can't be applied to someone who, let's take the alcoholic example. There's a tremendous amount of compassion that's needed for someone to have the champions around them to help them get there. But I see life as sort of these circles, you know, each one, like this is your closest unit. And then it's another circle and another circle and another circle. What I find really dangerous is when someone puts someone in a part of the circle, which is only designed for people you can rely on, people who are there to help to meet some of your needs, people you can ask things of. When you put someone who belongs in this circle, you're going to be really unhappy. So I have people in my life who I love to pieces. I have no problem with them. I love them. I want to help them. I love connecting with them. But I can't have them anywhere near this circle over here, because it will make me tremendously unhappy because I have expectations of people in this circle.
Yeah.
It's the person you're going to have an intimate relationship with is almost invariably going to be the person that you have the most expectations of. People are like, why is it so easy to, you know, my relationships with my friends are always great? Well, yeah, because you don't ask for shit from half of them, right? Like, I think of that all the time. It's like, you know, we met in January and we met this whole group of like, a lot of us didn't know each other, amazing guys that went to Poland and did the Wim Hof retreat, and we had these amazing bonds. But I'm also, you know, like, I think of this as a model for all relationships. It's like, I don't expect that group of people to show up to my life every day. I wouldn't put that kind of pressure on those relationships. I nurture them. I treasure them. I always want to show up where I can. But I recognize that I'm going to put a different kind of pressure on my mom, you know, or my brother than I would those people, because those things are earned over time. And it's really dangerous if you took the intimate relationship example, letting someone into the most intimate circle you have who hasn't earned that, who isn't able to provide that, who isn't giving you that. That is a recipe for being tortured.
So I love everything you had to say to answer that question. And I think it's really, really gives clear guidance. Now, here's the curveball that mucks it up a bit. Let's say the person typically is exactly that. But every once in a while they get really angry or really petulant or really in their own shit. And this is massively disturbing. But then they'll always come out of it and they're back to, you know, the disposition that really actually works for the inner circle. And then every time you're like, okay, like this doesn't work. And they're like, I agree. Like, I journaled about it. I drew the cards from all the mystical decks and I read 7 books and it's done. And you're like, cool. And then it happens again. You're like, I read the wrong book and I journaled the wrong way. And, you know, so you just keep having a different changing set of circumstances, or this happened because of this, or, oh, it was, you know, I had some stress going on. There's always a reason why this aberrant thing, which becomes a pattern, but you can't necessarily tell it's a pattern because the circumstances aren't identical, but then ultimately it doesn't make it work. Like that's a situation where it's hard to know when to go like, I give up on you. I give up on your ability to actually calm down this behavior that's intolerable for me.
There's a quote that I think is falsely attributed to Marilyn Monroe, but it's, if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best, which I always found to be disturbing as an idea, because you have there a mandate for the worst kind of behaviors in a relationship,
Right.
and a permission for them, because you're great when you're great. You know, I know I beat you last Tuesday, but if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. Well, you can see how dangerous this territory becomes.
Slippery fucking slope, that quote is.
So you know, I do think that people have to be tolerable at their worst.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to be anything good, you know, or they can be wholly unpleasant or whatever. There's a lot we'll make space for. And by the way, to some extent should, if we ever hope to be loved by anybody else, because we're bringing some shit to the table too.
No doubt.
But I do think that your worst, you have to ask yourself honestly, can I actually tolerate, and perhaps even a bit more than tolerate, can I still love this version of someone in their worst? Because that relationships aren't, you know, it's not the great date. It's the times when it hits the fan. I mean, I've made this analogy before about when I was 13. It's kind of a cheesy analogy, but it was just true for me. When I was 13, or I think the first time my parents took me to Disney World, I was more impressed. The thing that spoke to me even then was the trash cans in Disney World. I was like fascinated by the trash cans, because of course Space Mountain is fun. Like it's the best, right? Going and riding a big ride and all of the crazy parades and everything. That's amazing. That's obviously amazing. But in Disney, each trash can is designed based on the world that it's in. You know, the one in Tomorrowland is a futuristic trash can. The one in the Indiana Jones world is like this tiki, you know, trash can, whatever. And that impressed me so much because I went, they didn't need to design the trash cans. That, you know, that's vision to me. That's amazing vision. That's detail. And you ride Space Mountain once in a day, you use the trash can maybe 20 times, right? Your experience is more with the trash cans than it is with Space Mountain. And that fascinated me because I said someone with a vision cared enough to design the trash cans. You know why people don't fly from Australia or China to go to Six Flags Atlanta?
Because they don't care about the details.
Because the details aren't there. It's just a big ride. People travel from every corner of the earth to go to Disney World. The trash cans. And when I think about relationships, I think about what are the trash cans of your relationship? Because you're going to live a lot of your time in the trash cans, not what's the Space Mountain of your relationship? It's the honeymoon. It's the great date you went on. It's the fail. We went to Bora Bora. That was the greatest week ever. And people live on the high of Bora Bora once 5 years ago. But remember Bora Bora? Remember how great we were? Right? But that's not, the relationship is going to be defined by how good you are on a shitty Tuesday. Is that a person you want to spend time with on a shitty Tuesday when it's hitting the fan? Yeah. And so I think it's actually, in a sense, more important where things go when they're bad than how good they are when they're good. Yeah.
I love it when I have talked to somebody like you and I actually get answers to things that really make sense. And I'm like, here's a conundrum, and I'm expecting it fully to continue in my life as a conundrum forever. And all of a sudden, like, actually, yeah, that makes total sense. And now I understand things.
And that's where the work, that to me is where to bring things a little full circle, that's where the work comes in, is if you find someone that you're like, and it could be some combination of they're awesome and you're in a place in your life where you are actually ready to give the best version of you and to go all in. Because we all have at some point in our lives probably let go of someone awesome. Doesn't mean they were right for us, but they were awesome. So when someone being great meets us being ready, now we have real potential. And that to me is where a relationship can become extraordinary, not just great, because now you have two people that are actually going to put in the work that makes it extraordinary. And to the potential point that we've been talking about, there was a potential is hugely overrated, I think, in some ways, or at least waiting around for potential is overrated, especially in our love lives where, you know, you got to care about yourself first because life's not that long. You don't get to do it another 10 times, you know, as far as I know, at least. So there's a story of Bukowski was, he went to bed with a prostitute, woke up, and she stole his poetry. And he was really mad.
Damn.
And hurt. And, you know, he was so mad because he didn't care about much. Like he said, he literally wrote a poem the next day in this kind of anger where he essentially said, take the money from my jeans, take whatever else is around, but don't take my poetry because I don't know how many more there'll be. He said, don't take the poetry. But the poem finishes with the line, and then God crossed his legs and said to himself, that's enough. I've created many poets, but too few, not enough poetry, right? I misquote slightly, but the idea is enough poets, not enough poetry. And the implication for that in our love lives is that when you go on a date with someone and you're all excited and you know, why do people get nervous on a date? Why do people, we're so nervous. Like, oh my God, I don't want it to go wrong. I really like this person. Based on what? You've put the poet on a pedestal when there's no poetry.
Yeah.
The poetry is what you're doing now.
Too many lovers, not enough love.
Right. That's exactly right. You're creating poetry. You're actually writing a story now. Like you're doing it. That's real. Someone who, you know, gives a great date, because by the way, our narcissism will make us give a great date. Right? That's just me saying, I want you to tell me how great I am after this date. So
hello, LA.
Right. So that's just the poet. But the poetry is someone trying. The poetry is the realization of the potential of a relationship. And I look at that as a kind of unifying model for everything. Why do we get so heartbroken? In a way, we're still overvaluing the poet. Because if we were valuing the poetry, we'd realize the writing stopped. This person doesn't want to be with us. The poetry is not there.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, that is the guide star. That is the guide star. Is it still producing poetry? Is it still producing poetry in your life in some way? Is it still drawing those emotions from you? Is it still inspiring you? Is it still challenging you in a productive way that's not, you know, reiterative of everything that you've already been through? You know, like, is it still creating poetry? And then poetry can come from a variety of different sources. It's not all just the good emotions, but is there poetry still in it? Is, you know, writing the same, you know, boring, you know, trite piece of stringing the same words together? That's not poetry. That's redundant, you know?
Right.
And you're plagiarizing yourself if you're in the same situation. So are you still creating poetry? And I think that's the question for everybody to answer.
I love that.
This was fun, guys. I love that we did this. Thanks for making this happen.
Fuck yeah, man. Fuck yeah. You got stuff going on. Tell people what's going on.
I think I'm on Instagram at the Matthew Hussey, so come follow me there. And we have programs. We have free videos every week. If you just want to follow me and watch free videos, you can do that. If you want to take a bigger program, I have everything from online programs to memberships to a virtual retreat now that you can come and join.
Yeah.
So just come and get in, come follow us and see what we have to say. And
Do you have everybody on like a little mini TV screen like Tony Robbins and a giant full 360, studio platform?
We don't have, his looks like the end of The Matrix 3.
Yes.
Totally.
He's God in the middle of this. Life is surrounding him. 360. No, ours is slightly more modest in technical capability, but no less heart.
Yeah, no doubt.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
brother.
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
And so great to be with you, Vylana, as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like being here. I'm a podcaster now. Just kidding. Bye.
Thanks for checking out this video. For more like it, please subscribe to my channel. And of course, the Aubrey Marcus Podcast with new episodes every single week. And follow me on Instagram @Aubrey Marcus. Thank you so much.